In this video, I'm going to explain to you how to have long-lasting equipment. Two cycle, and 4 mix. The method to having long-lasting equipment, what you'll hear a lot of times, people say they bought something this year, and the next year they have problems with it running and problems with it starting. They can't figure out why. I took this apart for demonstration purposes. When you when you're running this equipment and you're at full throttle, these engines get up to 400 degrees in temperature. The reason that it doesn't go any higher is because you have the fan that's pulling in the air here, circulating it all through the system. It keeps it manageable. But once you cut this engine off, the manageable temperature spikes. But then while it spikes, you have some components of the engine that are cooler. So you have a mismatch in temperature when it's cooling. So in other words, the exhaust side, since it gets the hottest and it's no longer being cooled, the residual heat spikes and then it cools at a different temperature. So with this side may spike and stay at 425, and the intake side is at 375. It tends to cool at different temperatures, so you have a lopsided, your metal becomes lopsided because it's cooling at two different temperatures. The way to offset that is let the engine run. You've been out full throttle for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and when you're done, do not cut it off. Let the engine run. The reason you let it run is so that this cooling fan will continue to cool the engine, and the temperatures will equalize on the intake and the exhaust side while it's cooling. While it's sitting in idle, it'll cool down to both have a near equal cooling to a near equal idle temperature. And when you cut it off, they'll both cool at nearly the same temperature, as opposed to having a spike here and a cool here, and it offsets. And that's where you have the problems after from brand new, and then a year later or 2 seasons later, you're having equipment trouble because you've been cutting it off when it's at max temperature. And that's how I maintain my equipment. Anybody that uses my equipment, I tell them, look, once you're done, if it's with the blower, once you're done, I don't care how much you've been blowing, put it down and let it run. I'll spend an extra 25-30 cents of runtime for fuel, because once again, I use the AMSOIL 100% synthetic, and it's quite expensive, but I'll drink the extra. If it costs me 25 cents to let it idle for 5 minutes, then I'll deal with that, as opposed to having to replace a cylinder because the pistons are worn, or the cylinder's worn due to the constant contraction of the heat differences. So that's how you save your 2-cycle and 4 mix equipment. Do not cut it off after you run it. Let it run for about 2 to 5 minutes so that the engine will equalize in temperature, and once it's at idle and it cools for maybe 3 minutes at idle, it's at an idle temperature when you cut it off. It's not at a full bore max temperature when you cut it off. And that's how you save your equipment and have it long lasting. The dealers ain't gonna tell you that. The mechanic ain't gonna tell you that, because for one, I don't think they realize what's going on. And I don't think they know and they've paid attention enough to say it, or they're not saying nothing because they lose business. So that's how that goes. How to save your equipment and make it last long. I don't have no problems with my stuff starting, because that's what I do from day one when I get it. I let it run when I'm done, and just let it idle for about maybe 3 minutes. Do not cut it off once you're done. The guy that cuts the grass over there, where that car is, I've had to work on several pieces of equipment that he have, because what he does is, like I tell you, full bore, cutting and blowing, and he had a blower like this. That's why I got this blower, because I seen how he stood on one side of the driveway, and blew, and the grass on the other side of the driveway just blew off into the distance. And I just said I had to have the br700, and I put the br400 tip on there. And what I noticed with this, I don't even have to go full throttle when I'm cleaning up. I just crank the automatic throttle to maybe about right here, just a little bit above throttle, and it'll blow good. And it keeps this at a low volume, so I don't have people complain about, man, it sounds like they're riding dirt bikes around here, and gotta have the people come out and they have noise complaints. So that's what that is. But that's how you maintain your equipment. Don't cut it off.